I know I haven't talked about it on the channel before, and look, it's not like I cover TV extensively, but when it comes to something like Stranger Things, I mean, it's kind of this massive juggernaut. It's taken the entire world by storm. If you're not watching Stranger Things, if you haven't been watching Stranger Things, what are you doing? I mean, you're basically left out by this point. I've loved Stranger Things since the beginning. Even the weaker seasons always had something that kept me invested. Whether it was the charm of watching these kids grow up together, the genuine affection the show has for its influences, or those occasional moments where everything clicks and you remember why this became a cultural phenomenon in the first place. I've never regretted the time I've spent in Hawkins. I will admittedly miss it. The show meant something to me. It still does, which is why watching season 5 collapse under its own weight has been so goddamn devastating, and yet I can't bring myself to hate the show. Don't get me wrong, this season was a fucking mess, easily the worst season, but there were glimmers of the old Stranger Things that I fell in love with, and when it's all said and done, the show is more than its final season, and I'll absolutely revisit it over the years. That being said, what made Stranger Things great in its early seasons particularly wasn't the Demogorgons or the Upside Down or any of the sci-fi horror mythology and spectacle. It was the smallness, the intimacy, the focus on how people, specifically kids, but also parents in a small town community, respond to trauma, grief, and fear. Season 1 was about Joyce Byers continuing to believe that her son will come back to her, putting up Christmas lights to communicate across dimensions with her missing son, never losing faith, finding a way to save him. It was about a group of kids refusing to abandon their friend when the entire town had given up looking. It was about Hopper, a man consumed by apathy and grief over his daughter's death, learning to care again, learning to be better. His relationship with Eleven wasn't just heartwarming found family dynamics, it was messy and complicated, marked by his toxically masculine traits and an unwillingness to see that Jane isn't the daughter who died. His overprotectiveness, his inability to communicate without anger, his constant need to be the martyr and solve everything himself. These were real flaws the show didn't shy away from. Eleven calling him out, his struggle to let her have autonomy. This was a man getting a second chance to be a father and having to confront all the ways his grief and machismo got in the way of actually being good at it. The show understood that having someone to fill the void wasn't enough. Hopper had to do the work to become the parent Eleven needed, not just replay the past. The show may have been made for teens at the time, but its Gen X nostalgia for the 80s spoke more to adults, and this blending of Stephen King, Steven Spielberg, Amblin coming of age, and real adult writing is what made that first season so fucking effective. It was nuanced and dramatic in ways that didn't talk down to its audience. It understood that the lore of the Upside Down was never as important as what the Upside Down and the mythology associated with it represented to the characters, their fear, trauma, grief manifest. The show trusted its audience to care about character and emotion first, letting the supernatural elements serve the human drama rather than overwhelm it. And it featured genuine friction between its characters. The kids fought with each other, with lasting consequences and hurt feelings that didn't resolve in a single scene. Mike's possessiveness over Eleven created real tension with the group. Lucas and Dustin's competing feelings for Max led to genuine conflict. The adults made mistakes, said the wrong things, struggled with their own limitations. These weren't perfect people united in constant agreements. They were messy and complicated and real. And their disagreements mattered because the show treated interpersonal conflict as dramatically important as the supernatural threat. Even as the show scaled up in subsequent seasons, even as the mythology expanded and the stakes grew more larger than life, there were elements of that original DNA that persisted. Bob's tragic heroism in season 2, Hopper's letter in season 3, Billy and Max's relationship, and the tragic possession, redemption, and death of Billy and subsequent emotional toll that had on the characters, specifically Max. It all proved the show could go big and still feel grounded because it never lost sight of the characters at its center. Season 4 felt like the culmination of everything the Duffers had been building toward. They finally had a fully developed formidable adversary in Vecna, not just an entity or a force of nature, but a predator with motivation, methodology, and an almost Freddy Krueger-like presence. He weaponized fear and preyed upon the deepest, darkest insecurities of his victims, forcing them to relive their pain until their shame and guilt literally consumed them. And in doing so, he became the perfect antagonist for a show that had always been about how people process grief and fear, how being different and outside outsider, a nerd, is perceived as a weakness, but is actually the thing that makes you strong. Season 4 personalized this massive threat. Vecna was a manifestation of Max's internal struggle, a fight to find herself again, and it delivered real stakes. Hopper's death in Season 3 was emotionally devastating, and when Season 4 brought him back, a decision many, myself included, were disappointed with given how poignant and emotional the sacrifice and subsequent letter at the end of Season 3 was. It didn't feel like a cop-out because the show justified it with equal emotion. Joyce's hope, her belief that he still lives, and her determination to save him because she doesn't give up on people. Hopper's brutal imprisonment and torture, their reunion carrying the weight of everything they'd endured apart. The Duffers understood that you could undo a major decision and still honor its impact if you earned it. Season 4 ended with the Upside Down literally tearing through Hawkins. The barrier between worlds collapsed. A massive fissure split the town. Our heroes won the day, kind of, but at a cost, staring down an impending apocalypse. Max lay comatose, her bones shattered, her mind trapped somewhere between life and death. 11 couldn't save her. Doomsday wasn't looming anymore, it had arrived. The cliffhanger promised direct engagement with this catastrophe. But then Season 5 comes along and it opens with the military in control. The Upside Down invasion contained, fissures plated over, and a new status quo. Instead of continuing the momentum, the show hits pause. The threat becomes dormant, and with it comes a sense of regression for most everyone except Will and Dustin. And if they haven't regressed, the characters feel like a flanderization of who they once were. Everything has almost fallen into self-parody. It's the same trajectory as Star Wars, going from The Last Jedi to The Rise of Skywalker. A course correction that portrays the previous installment's bold choices, falling back on familiar beats and faux stakes while forgetting what made people care in the first place. The Last Jedi, whatever you think of its choices, committed to them. It pushes its characters into genuinely uncomfortable territory and forced them to reckon with failure. The Rise of Skywalker panics, trying to please everyone while satisfying no one, stuffing the runtime with plot mechanics and nostalgia while losing the emotional core by playing it safe and forgetting what the trilogy had been about in the process. Stranger Things Season 5 has made the same mistake. In trying to deliver the ending fans expect, it's forgotten what made Stranger Things matter. It forgot what made the show so fucking special. The show that once moved us with a mother's grief has left reality altogether. And in that transformation, the show lost itself.
This video is sponsored by GoDaddy. Are you ever wandering the Mojave wastelands and you come across a piece of trash and you're like, wowee, that's a nice piece of trash. I wish I could take a picture of it for all my friends to see in New Vegas. That's exactly why I created Litterboxd, a trash rating social media hub for the modern post-apocalyptic traveler. Here's how it works. You see cool trash, you take a picture of it and post it to litterboxd.rad. That's it. From there, you can check out other people's trash and even rate and review the trash that they've seen. I gave this one 3 bottle caps, and all of it was possible to make with GoDaddy Arrow. From domain rights to website building tools, GoDaddy helped my wasteland dreams come true. And now, GoDaddy Arrow assists budding and experienced business owners even further by using a powerful, always-on assistant to help create things like a website, logo, and even social media posts to spread the word of your fantastic business idea across the wastelands. Starting your business has never been easier thanks to GoDaddy Arrow. Think you've got a better idea for a thriving business in a post-apocalyptic wasteland? Try building it for free now with GoDaddy Arrow through the link listed below. And once you've made your business, share it online. And be sure to tag @GoDaddy and @Fallout on Prime with your entrepreneurial endeavors. GoDaddy Arrow has the power and the tools to make your next idea a New Vegas novelty. And be sure to watch Season 2 of Fallout, now on Prime Video.
I think you need to hear this too. Everyone does.
The most obvious symptom of Stranger Things Season 5's collapse is also the most frustrating. There are simply too many goddamn characters and the show has nothing meaningful for most of them to do. It's been a creeping problem for several seasons now. The cast naturally expanded as the world grew, relationships formed, and new threats emerged. But Season 5 represents the breaking point, where the sheer number of bodies on screen becomes actively detrimental to storytelling. And even worse, the show keeps adding more characters this go go-around. Holly Wheeler upgraded from background player to main character. Dipshit Derek. Holly returning. A military subplot in Linda Hamilton and various grunts whom I guess have personal grievances with Hopper for torturing them. That character sucks. Mr. Clark getting out of the classroom and into the field. Vicky doing nothing but just not believing the very obvious supernatural events happening around her while simultaneously having nothing substantive for its established ensemble to do. Mike, one of the original heart and soul characters of the series, is just there. He's Elle's boyfriend, Will's best friend, and that's kinda it. He gets a few moments of being a caring older brother to Holly, helping her understand the bravery within her and making her a nice totem for her to carry with her and remind her that she doesn't have to be afraid, which is nice, but as Holly's been promoted to main character, Mike kind of treads water. This has honestly been an issue for him the past few seasons outside of a handful of powerful moments, such as him professing his love to Eleven last season, but the point still remains. After he and Eleven got together and his best friend returned, there wasn't much for him to do, and as a result, he's become probably the most uninteresting character out of the core group. Lucas is in the same boat, present, occasionally useful, but lacking any real arc or purpose beyond his connection to Max. And I love what they did with Lucas last season, and what they did with Lucas and Max last season, so it's a little bit of a bummer to see him just kind of be there. These were kids who once drove the narrative. Now they're passengers. And then there's Eleven herself, the protagonist of the entire series, basically, who's sidelined for much of the season. She deserved more real estate, more focus, more moments that would make her eventual sacrifice feel earned by this season's work rather than by highlights from seasons past. When the finale tries to make us feel the weight of losing her, it's leaning almost entirely on accumulated goodwill from previous seasons rather than anything season 5 has built. For a character who should be at the absolute center of the final season, Eleven feels strangely peripheral until the plot needs her to make the ultimate choice. Then there's the adults who, oh my god, have it even worse. Joyce Byers has been reduced to a meek sounding board for her sons, seemingly forgetting she has an eldest child while serving as Will's therapist. Winona Ryder was the face of this franchise. She was top billing when they were first promoting the show and when it aired, and now look at her. This is a woman who pushed people. She challenged their actions and inaction. She scolded Hopper for acting like a lone gunslinger in season 1, risking his life to find Will because he's the only one capable of doing it, which we all know is not true.
We had a funeral. We buried him. And now you're asking for my help? Go to hell.
She asserted herself, demanded that he value his own life, something Hopper struggled with due to his own grief. She never let her grief consume her and tried to help someone suffering like her. That Joyce had fire. She loved, fiercely fought for her kids against every institution and person who told her to give up hope. When she found Bob, she found someone who believed her, who supported her, who loved her boys. Bob's death in season 2 was devastating precisely because we'd seen Joyce finally let someone in, finally trust someone with her heart and her family. And when Hopper came back in season 4, when she learned he was alive after grieving him, that reunion carried weight because we understood what he meant to her. Another person who believed her, another person who fought alongside her for her kids, who had shared experiences and trauma and just got each other on a deeply intimate level. Now, she's just kind of along for the ride. She has the same conversation with Hopper about being overprotective that they've apparently had dozens of times before. The show recycling conflict without development. Where is the fierce, passionate determinism that defined her? It's nowhere to be found. And this sidelining makes the finale moment where Joyce executes Vecna ring a bit hollow. The show wants to be cathartic. Joyce getting revenge for all the pain and trauma he's inflicted on her family. The rest of the crew reflecting on that as she hacks off his head. And it should work. Joyce has every reason to want Vecna dead, but because she hasn't been allowed to be a presence the way she was in earlier seasons, the moment lacks the payoff it needs. Hopper himself, a character the show spent 4 seasons developing from grief-numb, toxically masculine asshole to vulnerable, trying his best father figure, now just talks in circles about the same protective instincts he's supposedly already worked through. The adults don't feel like adults anymore for the most part. I get the show is aimed at a younger teen, 20-year-old audience or something like that, but like, the show used to be incredibly adults all the way through season 4. And then there's Kali. Remember Kali, Eleven's sister from season 2's widely derided Chicago episode? Yep, she's back. Oh my god, thrown into the mix with no meaningful relationship to anyone else in the cast except 11, serving no clear purpose beyond being another body in already overstuffed scenes and forcing a conflict with 11 about sacrificing herself to stop the military and experimenting on more people to end Papa's work once and for all. But this feels less like organic character tension and more like a manufactured plot device. Callie exists to create this specific dilemma, not because she has a meaningful arc of her own or because her presence enriches the story in any other way. And then the show kills her off. She's the expendable one, which is fine because no one really fucking cares, but it is funny that the character nobody cares about because the show never gave us a reason to is the one that dies. While it was nice to see the Duffers attempt to bring this character back and remedy the most controversial episode of the series, it feels like it was all for nothing. Callie was just there for exposition and as a tool for 11's potential sacrifice. She offered nothing by way of character development, and her emergence had minimal effect on 11's journey beyond maybe forcing her to consider that sacrifice. The military subplot adds even more dead weight. Linda Hamilton shows up as Dr. K, yet another authority figure trying to finish what Papa started. Essentially, a Matthew Modine replacement. I mean, just like, look at the fucking hair. What does this add beyond a redundant obstacle? Isn't the threat of Vecna in the literal apocalypse enough? And the military subplot is just so lame as well, so pointless. It really served no purpose other than to provide a conflict to push the narrative forward and force 11 to make a pointless sacrifice. What's insane is that after Vecna is revealed at the end of episode 4, you'd think that would cause the military to turn its resources toward helping the crew. They'd see the real threats, but no, that doesn't happen. They continue acting as if nothing had changed, maintaining their antagonistic stance for no reason beyond the plot needs to push our heroes in this direction. What the show should have done is make the Vecna reveal a turning point for the military. Have them realize the kids were right all along and pivot to arming and assisting the crew. That way, by the time the final battle comes around, there's more to it instead of the crew just fighting the Mind Flayer with whatever meager weapons they scrounged up. It would have made the build-up to the climactic battle more substantial. The Demogorgons could have actually been in the battle. There could have been strategic planning to reach the Mind Flayer, real tactical complexity. If you're gonna go big, at least commit to going big in the final battle. And since Dr. K was a useless character without any defining traits or motivation of her own, this would have afforded her and that subplot actual development, giving her a point for existing. You could even throw in a twist where after they defeat Vecna, the military still wants to continue trying to use 11 to recreate Papa's program, showing they learned the wrong lessons. That would at least give the subplot some thematic weight beyond just being an annoying roadblock. The result of this character bloat is scenes where an absurd amount of people are standing around having the same conversation. They're not arguing, they're not bringing different perspectives or creating conflict, they're just agreeing with each other, repeating the same sentiment in slightly different words, nodding, affirming, moving the plot forward through collective consensus. When you have a massive group of characters who all talk and act the same, want the same things, and approach problems with the same energy, you don't have individuals anymore, which is rich coming from a show about the need for individualism. And the show's solution to this problem is somehow to keep adding more people to the chorus rather than cutting it down to the voices that matter. Will's coming out scene, which we'll touch on a bit more in depth later on, don't worry, is the most egregious example of this clown car effect. It should be one of the most important character moments in the entire series. However, it plays out like him dumping a bunch of shit onto his friends without allowing for a dialogue, without allowing for his mom or his best friend to engage with what he's saying and reassure him. All they say is,
"You'll never lose me."
And you'll never lose me. Or me. Or me. Or me.
Or me.
and it keeps going. I get the sentiment. It's nice and theoretically emotional, but it's just a comically large group of people reiterating the same thing. It's like an Adult Swim bit. I like the attempt to place an emphasis on Jonathan, seeing as he and Will's relationship is one that's felt a bit neglected, and given how close they are, I was genuinely interested and compelled by his response. But then it just becomes the first in a line of ripples, and although Charlie Heaton plays the moment beautifully, as does Winona Ryder, they're held back by the writing and scene. It's why it feels so artificial. The show has become so terrified of leaving anyone out, so committed to keeping its entire ensemble on screen at all times, that it's sacrificing the intimacy and specificity that makes emotional moments land. This bloat also directly leads to the Flanderization. When you have too many characters and not enough narrative purpose for them, they become simplified. It's actually insane how every character is a shell of their former selves, like the least complex they've ever been, but I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise given that the show doesn't have time to explore ignore that complexity. And the show's unwillingness to create genuine friction between these characters makes the problem worse. The original vision of Stranger Things understood that messy, complicated characters in conflict with each other is the drama. The supernatural threats is just the crucible that forces those conflicts to the surface. When you have a clown car full of characters who all agree with each other, who all want the same things, who never create meaningful friction, what are we even watching? The show needed to make hard choices about who to focus on in its final season. It needed to cut characters, streamline storylines, and create space for the people who matter most to have real arcs. Instead, it just kept adding more names to the call sheet, more bodies to cram into scenes, more voices saying the same damn things, and in trying to give everyone a moment, it gives no one a meaningful journey.
I got it, guys.
I got it. Okay, I'll go first.
I don't know what happened between season 4 and 5, but the dialogue is also the worst it's ever been. Characters don't actually talk, they just explain things to each other and to us endlessly. The dialogue has been overtaken by exposition, with characters spending tedious amounts of time discussing mythology. Exposition is necessary in progressing the plot and helping us understand lore expansions, but it shouldn't be the sole thing driving conversations between characters. I get a final season needs to answer remaining questions, but it shouldn't be the primary focus. You can answer those questions, sure, but you have to balance them with compelling character beats, and the show fails to do so. When we do get those important character moments, they're insanely protracted and poorly integrated into scenes, halting any and all momentum. With any final season, the priority should be on wrapping up the character arcs and ensuring the emotional payoff is strong. That's really all people care about. The lore, the rules, yeah, save it for the coffee table book on Stranger Things or the wiki page. I get that the Duffers felt a responsibility in trying to spill the secrets of the Upside Down, but when you look back at the season, outside of it being a wormhole and Will's powers, there wasn't much lore expansion. It mostly came down to over-explaining the mechanics that had already been explained to us 3 scenes prior, and these insane plans that are just crazy enough to work. How much time was devoted to telling us that Will is basically a Horcrux, gaining his power from Vecna because he's a sorcerer? How many scenes of people standing in circles explaining wormholes, Vecna preying upon kids, and how the military needs Eleven's blood for their experiments?
I need his blood.
This is all compounded by the structure and cadence of these scenes. The characters all sound the same. They're robbed of their distinct voices and operating more like a hive mind than individuals, which, again, is rich given it's a show about embracing individualism. We've all seen the memes by this point, but...
Right, so what are we looking for exactly? I don't even know really, but maybe if we just start randomly finishing each other's sentences, then we can magically work it out.
If this is the Upside Down, and this is us, and...
We need to connect Vecna to the radiation diagram machine network substrate fucking bullshit dialogue.
I think something's in between, but then that means there's a wormhole that could suck us out.
This happens constantly. It's different characters explaining the same plan in a different way as everyone else stands in a circle finishing each other's sentences around the horn style, volleying exposition back and forth. It's fucking mind-numbing. It's also frustrating because by some miracle there is an important piece of information in there that we should know about. I, as a viewer, have already checked out. I'm hardly listening because I'm just waiting until we move on to the next scene, which is more than likely another exposition scene. Occasionally, the show will interrupt this cycle for what feels like a mandatory emotional checkpoint. These aren't bad scenes in isolation. Nancy and Jonathan's breakup was remarkably mature and understood the direction each character was headed in. There was nuance to this thing, where you have two people who genuinely care about one another, who've endured shared trauma that bonds them for life, and how they're trying to reconcile that with where they are now in life and the things they need. It puts an end to the love triangle with Steve and shifts the relationship into a direction it needed to mature into for a while. It also understands that both parties have shit that makes it hard for the other to be in a relationship with them. They call it quits at the right time, when there's still enough love for one another to recognize it means letting go. Also, it was just very poetic that the whole scene took place in a room that was melting and looked like the Jack and Rose floating on the door in Titanic. Max helping Holly realize she's braver than she thinks, that she's endured enough to face Vecna on her own, is another potentially powerful moment. It's about overcoming fear through connection, learning from the past, and recognizing your own strength. But again, these moments feel isolated from the main narrative. Checkpoints bracketed by so much discussion that they feel phony. Like the show is ticking boxes rather than letting character emerge organically. It's clear the Duffers are saddled with feeling they have to answer all of the show's remaining questions and wrap up these character arcs and mysteries and ensuring compelling character payoff, and wind up shortchanging both. I understand that planning and gear up scenes have always been a part of the show, but they were always once a season, not at least once an episode. This is a show that used to trust its audience, respect them. Scenes used to actually be about something. The mysteries of the Upside Down were frightening and intriguing because they spoke to the repressed fears and trauma of the characters. Even as the show got bigger and more popular, it never felt the need to talk down to its audience, infantilize them. Now, I mean, no one converses about anything except plots in excruciating detail, and yet the plot never fully becomes clear. It does in the broad strokes, but like these individual things, it's complete nonsense. We spent so much time hearing characters explain Vecna's powers, the nature of Will's connection to him, the mechanics of the Upside Down invasion, and yet, what is Vecna actually trying to accomplish? Why does he want Holly specifically, or the 12 other kids he's abducted? What is his end game beyond turning the world into a hellscape? What does he want to do with this new world? What is his worldview and why? His origin and the reasons why he feels the world is broken beyond repair, why he would align himself with the Mind Flayer, require you to infer too much for it to make sense. Season 4 understood this. It understood that Vecna worked because he was a predator who weaponized trauma. His powers were just the mechanism for exploring how characters dealt with guilt, grief, and shame. Max's confrontation with him was about whether she could find a reason to keep living after her brother's death. The emotional stakes were the priority. This go around, well, because of everything that the Duffers are balancing, they're trying to be comprehensive, but in doing so, they've made the show tedious, and yet it's still not as comprehensive as I think they think it is. The fact that you need to watch a stage play to understand Vecna's origin is emblematic of this problem. The show has offloaded crucial character information to supplementary material while using its actual runtime to have characters stand in circles explaining plans and powers. It's like, what are we doing here? The more the show explains, the more it spins its rudders, and the less interesting it becomes. And all that explanation hasn't made the story clearer, it just made it more exhausting to watch. Throughout the season, we're told there will be catastrophic consequences, and then when we actually see things play out, there's nothing really at stake, constantly presenting urgency without actually feeling urgent. Take the Dustin and Steve conflict, arguably the best subplots of the entire season because, you know, Dustin is an actual character, and so is Steve. Dustin is spiraling after Eddie's death, struggling with depression, grief, even self-harm. He's wallowing in these emotions of the belief that he doesn't deserve happiness, while his best friends are more focused on the mission than his mental state. This naturally builds tension with Steve, Dustin's frequent mission partner and best friend alongside the deceased Eddie. Their usual bickering over plan details escalates, becoming vitriolic, compounding until they have a real argument where Steve says some harsh words about Eddie playing the hero for no reason, ultimately dying a martyr when he didn't have to.
Eddie wanted to play hero, and he made a dumb call, and he got himself killed.
This is actual conflict. It's great. It's personal. It comes from the character rather than the plot, and it's a character beat that affects the plot. Dustin breaks his walkie-talkie during the fight. Later, when Nancy is about to fire into unstable matter that could destabilize the Upside Down, Dustin can't communicate with her to tell her about what he's learned about the matter, the fact that the Upside Down is a wormhole, and the fact that she's about to fucking blow everything up. He can't warn her. The argument has consequences. A character moment creates a plot problem, and this is fucking great. This is what the show should be doing. This is what we've been wanting the whole time, and it immediately backs down from this. Following that cliffhanger, everyone seems to evade the explosion with ease. The other team in the Upside Down, Elle, Callie, and Hopper, who have no idea this life or death scenario is going on, is confronted with this obstacle and basically sidestep it. At first, it seems like, maybe Nancy and Jonathan are up against a ticking clock, that their actions will have consequences, but it quickly goes away as they have all the time in the world to hash out their relationship problems, and then they just get rescued anyways. Their actions have no consequences. It just forces them to have a heart-to-heart. That's frustrating, but it would at least be tolerable if them breaking up had any sort of impact on the larger story. But it doesn't, because it barely felt like they were together in the first place. The relationship was just dead weight that needed to be shed a long time ago. I guess it does give us at least one meaningful scene between Jonathan and Steve in the finale. Nancy's two romantic rivals finally have an honest conversation about their connection connection to Nancy. Jonathan recognizes that he was projecting his insecurities onto Steve, and Steve recognizes that his disdain for Jonathan caused him to withhold information about what Nancy actually wants out of life, information that kept him from being a threat to their relationship. Steve admits that he can be a dick, and Jonathan does the same, and the fact that Jonathan saves Steve shows that the two guys care more than they let on. Their competition for Nancy's affection, someone who's independent, has strength and agency within herself, and is uninterested in intimacy from these guys at this point in time, had more to do with their own feelings of inadequacy than anything about her. It was a necessary immature moment that I'm glad the Duffers addressed in the finale, but it's not like that one conversation caused Jonathan to save Steve. The scene is toothlessly staged to make us believe Steve is dying, and even milks the fuck out of it by cutting to black. It's really embarrassing, but no one actually believes it. The execution is so transparent, so clumsy, that it never lands as a genuine threat. And of course, you know, Steve is fine. It's just another fake out in a season full of them, and a season full of cowardice, faux tension, and manufactured drama presenting as important and intense without actually being those things. It also doesn't help that everyone from Hopper to Dustin to Eleven to Max to literally whoever are written in a way where they yearn for death. They want to die so goddamn bad, and the Duffers want to make you believe it's so bad. And when Eleven finally does become the sacrificial lamb of it all, it feels so forced, but you know, more on that later. And then there's the final battle itself, the climactic confrontation we've been building toward for 5 seasons, and it's over and done with as quickly as we got there, and it feels like nothing. The biggest issue with the final battle is how easily it's resolved. We're told that this is the biggest threats our heroes have ever faced. The Mind Flayer is enormous, intimidating, terrifying, formidable, but the actual battle is tackled with ease. Also, the Wild Wild West and Linkin Park memes are so fucking spot on. Vecna and the Mind Flayer go down swifter than any past antagonist. There's little at stake. Yeah, an apocalyptic event, but nothing tangible, nothing personal that grounds the larger threats in character. The story feels immovable. Everything the characters do has little to no impact on the final outcome. It was just going to happen the way it was going to happen, regardless of what the characters did. And it's a shame because there's so many interesting ideas with Henry that are resolved too fast. The show gives us this compelling revelation about Henry's relationship with the Mind Flayer. How, just like Will was a vessel for Henry, Henry was a vessel for the Mind Flayer. Unlike Will, Henry didn't have the strength to break free. It forced him to see the worst in humanity, something he was already predisposed to believe based on his own experiences. Will tries to see the good in Henry, but Henry's too far gone. The world is too broken. The status quo will never change. Everything is rigid and structure and stagnant. He needs the Mind Flayer, and it needs him in order to create this new world that they want. They are one. It's a toxic, codependent relationship. He resents the child he was and only sees utility in children now, using them as batteries the way he was used by someone before him. He's not breaking a cycle, he's continuing it. The tragedy of Henry is that he doesn't believe he deserves a life worth living. He lets his trauma, his pain, his fear define him. You can see the sadness, the imprisonment in his eyes, acted tremendously by Jamie Campbell Bower. He denies himself love and friendship and inflicts his self-hatred onto others. This is genuinely interesting character work. Granted, I had to infer a lot of that, but given the ideas the show is grappling with, that makes the most sense to me. It's a compelling exploration of how trauma can create monsters, how refusing to accept that you deserve happiness can poison everything you touch. It creates a powerful thematic parallel with Hopper telling Eleven that she does deserve a life of happiness despite the cruelty of the world. But the show introduces these ideas at the 11th hour, no pun intended, and then rushes through them. We don't get time to sit with Henry's tragedy, to feel the weight of what he's become and why. The confrontation between Elle and Henry, which should feel like the culmination of everything we've been building toward, lacks the buildup it needs because the two hardly interacted all season until the finale. These are two adversaries who've been positioned as mirror images, both shaped by Papa's experiments, both struggling with what they deserve and what they owe the world. Their final battle should be epic, emotionally devastating, a clash that feels earned. Instead, it's kind of perfunctory. There's no real challenge for the heroes, no moments where it feels like they might actually lose, no sacrifice that costs them something meaningful. The pattern is exhausting because it trains you to stop caring. Why invest in any moment of danger when the show has consistently demonstrated it won't follow through? It pulls its punches. Why worry about any character when you know the show is too afraid to actually put them at meaningful risk? And no, that doesn't mean people need to die, though in hindsight, Hopper probably should have died at the end of season 3. Max Max at the end of 4, and maybe Will or Jonathan or whoever at the end of season 5, given each of those characters had a moment that would constitute a death in any other show, but the Duffers bailed here. There just needs to be genuine emotional impact on the players that has to affect the narrative going forward. The siloing of these moments and the lack of overall consequences as a result also affect Holly. Max helps her realize that she's braver than she thinks, and now that she's endured all she has, she's better equipped to face Vecna in the Upside Down on her own. She's ready to escape on her own, and while her journey is longer and more complicated than Max's, because, you know, continuing to torture Max is a bit much at this point, she finds a way to break out. Only she doesn't. She escapes and then gets abducted again, overcoming this massive obstacle. It's a great moment of character, and then she's just thrown back in the dream with the rest of the kids, only this time, instead of using her to help free the kids, they all turn on her and nothing matters. Yes, eventually she does have to help the kids get out, but she doesn't do it alone. She needs Max, Eleven, and Kali to convince the kids that Holly is telling the truth, undercutting her moment. Max being the guide through Vecna's mind made sense, but it felt like outside of Max escaping her coma, her story was finished last season and truthfully should have concluded with her helping Holly. She didn't have much to do, which is fine, but the Duffers continually found ways to force her into the story. I think instead of having Holly be rescued again, Holly should have been the one to show Elle and Kali through Vecna's mind, and you could have achieved that by allowing her to escape when she initially was, instead of having her repeat the same beats again, robbing her of her agency in the matter and diminishing the impact of what happened between her and Max. It's so unnecessary and repetitive, especially because we have Derek, another new character we've become endeared to, still trapped in Vecna's mind, who is in the process of learning to be less of a selfish prick and actually help and care for other people. Having him be the one to help free the other kids would carry so much more weight. Holly was brave. She broke the rules. She escaped her abductor and took action when she previously was too afraid to. Derek tried to help, and then when Vecna threatened his family, he submitted. He has to learn to not let bullies control his agency and prove he is more than a self-preserving dick. By allowing Derek to be the one to lead the kids out of Vecna's mind, you not only pay off his arc, giving him a chance to solidify his change in character, but you allow Max's arc to finish, Holly to have agency and contribute to the climax of the narrative she's been at the center of. This also ties into how the show keeps returning to familiar beats and imagery. Characters gearing up for a final assault, Max escaping Vecna's mind to Cape Bush, Demogorgons hunting the crew in a hospital a la Jurassic Park Velociraptors, the gang splitting up to execute multi-pronged plans. These are all callbacks to moments that resonated in previous seasons, but season 5 recycles them while missing why they were impactful in the first place. I get running up that hill has become the anthem for Stranger Things at this point. When you watch season 4's version against season 5's, it's fucking sad, man. That moment worked because we spent the entire season watching Max withdraw from her friends, retreat into her music, struggle with guilt over Billy's death and her depression in the aftermath. We saw her pull away from Lucas, isolate herself, contemplate whether life was worth living. When Vecna trapped her, showing her Billy's corpse and weaponizing her guilt, we understood exactly what she was fighting. And when her friends played Running Up That Hill, her song, the one we'd seen her use as armor and escape, she ran toward the light, toward her friend's voice. The music was a symbol of Max choosing to live, choosing connection over isolation, refusing to let her guilt, her pain consume her. When she fell to Vecna at the end of the season, it was devastating because the show committed to the consequence. Max didn't just get rescued, she was left in a coma, fundamentally changed, and that loss hung over everything. Because the show made Kate Bush a card to pull whenever it wants to elicit an emotional reaction, it becomes a crutch the Duffers lean on when they want the audience to feel something without doing the work to earn it. We've seen this beat so many goddamn times now that it's lost all impact. It's recycling instead of evolving. This is why the season feels exhausting. We're treading water, redundantly cycling through things our characters have either already addressed in previous seasons or this current one, playing the greatest hits of Stranger Things instead of orchestrating new ones one last time. In episode 4 of this season, Will has an incredible moment where he recognizes the strength within himself and unlocks his powers. It's genuinely one of the season's highlights. Will learns to take control of his connection to Vecna, to use what's become a source of victimhood and trauma as a source of strength. The sequence works because it's about Will's relationship with himself, refusing to be defined by what was done to him, recognizing that surviving what he survived makes him stronger, not weaker, and that if he's to break free of this vicious cycle, he needs to learn to love himself and embrace who he is. But then the show undermines it by repeating versions of this beat without adding new dimension. When Will uses his connection to communicate with Max and Holly across time and space, he tells them, "You need to run." It's functionally useful, but emotionally empty. Here's an opportunity for Will to communicate something that carries real weight, something personal that only he could say to Max in that moment, something that speaks to their shared experience of being targeted by Vecna, of surviving trauma, of finding reasons to keep fighting, possibly helping her understand that she doesn't need the music to break free. Instead, it's just a line that could have come from anyone. It superficially recreates the same moment from episode 4. It didn't have to be Will. He was just the one able to do it, and he does it with less impact and fanfare than what came before because we've already seen him go through a moment like this. And I get it. Will has been the most underserved character in Stranger Things from the beginning. He was absent for most of season 1, possessed in season 2, sidelined in season 3 and 4, and finally, season 5 attempts to give him the arc he's deserved for years. But it's this repackaging that makes the season feel so underwhelming. It's not that I disagree with the direction of the story, it's just that I think the execution is exhausting and leaves much to be desired. The season should be escalating, but it just kind of peaked after season 4's finale and is exasperated with all it has to accomplish and thus gradually runs out of steam. And then there's the coming out scene. Oh my god. It suffers from nearly every systemic issue plaguing season 5. The bones are there. Will's vulnerable, he's scared, finally saying the things he's been terrified to say. The show's instinct to have his friends and family respond with love and acceptance is the right call, but boy, the execution is rough. We've already talked about the absurd amount of characters involved in that scene and why it turns what should be an intimate moment between two best friends and his family into a momentum-halting parody of itself, but the scene also reduces Will to his sexuality, and it being the thing that holds him back from unlocking his full potential in the fight against Vecna. I mean, Vecna essentially outs Will in this moment. The framing makes his queerness feel like his superpower, trivializing it by making it the thing that gives him strength against Vecna. While I understand the instinct to make this empowering, it's a reduction of who Will is. His queerness is one aspect of a complex person, not the defining feature. By treating his coming out as something that unlocks his power, the show turns his identity into a plot device. It's also frustrating because if Will embracing his sexuality and being fully honest with himself was supposed to unlock his full potential and make him more powerful in the final fight, I can't say that we saw him do anything we hadn't already seen him do, which weakened the impact of all of this. Again, if the coming out scene was given the weight of him unlocking his powers in episode 4, it would have been a lot more impactful. Have one massive climactic moment for Will instead of multiple. The show tries to remedy this later with a private moment between Will and Mike, but it's truthfully too little too late. And this is frustrating because the show has already demonstrated it knows how to do this right. Robin's coming out to Steve in season 3 remains one of the best moments in the entire series, and this moment should have been handled with as much care. Robin opening up to Steve was this really tender moment between two characters who saw each other and felt accepted, and it strengthened their friendship in a way that was shown instead of us being told, which is what happens with Will and Mike. The scene between Robin and Steve is still one of my favorites in the entire series because of how sweet and wholesome and nuanced and beautiful it is. It brought me to tears when I first watched it because everyone deserves to be seen that way. Nothing is said in that brief conversation with Will and Mike that neither character hadn't already expressed or said in the original scene, and so it feels redundant, but also exposes why it should have been handled differently to begin with. While I get the line of thoughts, the coming out scene is also ineffective because while the characters have seen stranger things in their lives than a guy liking dudes and would naturally be more open-minded to Will's coming out than the vast majority of Midwesterners in the 1980s, I think the show botched it by not exploring this idea more, by not showing more people having a negative reaction to the idea he might be queer early on in the show, and then seeing how their experiences broaden their horizons to the point where when Will finally does come out, their reaction is vastly different to what it would have been in a world where they didn't go through those same experiences. Hell, I mean, you could have literally had a character like Hopper, who is a lot older than the rest of the cast and therefore calcified his prejudiced views long before the events of the show.
Lonnie used to say he was queer, called him a
Is he?
have an adverse reaction to it, and then have to have an aside with someone who can sort of talk them through it and help them come to the same realization that the rest have come to. But the show is seemingly afraid to let anyone's fan favorite have a negative trait. The first season was really great about this. I mean, Jonathan was kind of a creeper who stalked and took pictures of Steve and Nancy and all that, and so, like, you know, he had a bit of a redemption there. Having Eleven changes Hopper, having a daughter who doesn't conform to gender stereotypes would be a great way to help him grow past his previously rigid views of sex and sexuality. We see how he becomes a warm, protective, loving parent, but then that should cause him to reflect on how he's treated Joyce's son. That's not only better character writing, but it's more interesting drama for the audience. It would have been a very adult way of addressing this within the time period. Hell, fuck the time period. Vecna himself, the very one preying upon Will's insecurities and perceived weakness, someone who could be a stand-in for the adversity a queer person has to face in the 80s Midwest, isn't even weaponizing it against him. He's not shaming him or bullying him or preying upon his sexuality. His sexuality is a non-factor in his conflict with Vecna, and yet the moment is built up to make it seem like it is. Regardless, the unwillingness to depict genuine friction in the group is why the cavalcade of characters feels so egregious.
All right, lab rats, let's scurry up. An entire dimension's about to come crashing down on our heads.
The finale itself is satisfying in moments. The epilogue delivers some genuinely moving character beats, the kind of intimate character work that made us fall in love with the show. But the epilogue is doing most of the heavy lifting. It's delivering on promises the season itself didn't earn. Nancy going full Ripley this season, especially in the climactic battle, was awesome to see. She definitely has one of the best arcs throughout the entire series, going from someone who is passively living her life, looking for answers in other people, to embracing her independence and finding agency on her own terms. She's also someone who suffered the traumatic loss of her best friend, and that interferes with her happiness, but it also pushes her to uncovering her strength. Like most all of the characters in the show, she becomes a more active, self-assured person, personified by being the action hero of the series. She becomes a woman of action, and while initially that takes the form of being a warrior, she understands that adhering to an archetype isn't conducive to growth and wisely puts the guns down and takes action in a different way. She goes back to pursue journalism, using her voice to do actual good in the world, honoring the memory of Barb and other victims like her. That's a hell of an arc for a character who started out as Steve's girlfriend and grew into someone with genuine agency and purpose. Dustin honoring Eddie's memory by doing exactly what Eddie said he would do when he graduated.
I'm gonna walk that stage. I'm gonna look Principal Higgins dead in the eye. I'm gonna flip him the bird. I'm gonna snatch that diploma. I'm gonna run like hell out of here.
The entire season, the spirit of Eddie lived in Dustin, and that included some of the bad traits, but in the end, it was mostly the good, the impact that Eddie had on Dustin's life, the non-conformity of it all, the rejection of the status quo and embrace of individualism spreading through the group and definitely in Dustin. That is what prevailed. The chaotic good triumphing over chaotic bad. Structure and class stereotypes broken down as people grew beyond their labels and became well-rounded, multifaceted individuals. Dustin has one of the most satisfying arcs in the entire series and most personifies those ideas, and it was nice to get a strong punctuation point on it. It was also nice to see Steve's selfless arc reach its natural conclusion, with him sticking around Hawkins. He was always going to be the kind of guy who doesn't leave his hometown, and being a coach and mentor to the next generation of kids. Really, this is all the final transformation of what began with the babysitter stuff and learning how to be there for other people, not only helping them through their problems, but helping them find themselves in the process. He was always a reliable shoulder to lean on, and it's beautiful how his experiences with Dustin and Robin teed him up for this kind of future. The wrap-up in general for the older kids, emphasizing the importance of staying in touch and maintaining friendships, but acknowledging the melancholy truth that those meetups will likely fade over time, was remarkably mature. Life gets in the way. People drift apart. They may plan to meet up at Robin's uncle's place in Philadelphia once a year, but you get the sense that it's wishful thinking, that it's something that will fade over time. Some may stop showing up, and then eventually all of them will. And it's a reminder to cherish the relationships you have in your life while you still have them, to be present and love the people in your life at this moment, because things do change and it won't last forever. That doesn't mean they aren't important and that they don't help you grow as a person. Those connections are essential and matter and will always be a part of you, but there comes comes a time when new relationships take precedence, and that's just a part of life. This pairs beautifully with Mike's wish for his friends. The D&D crew moving on to do great things, embarking on new adventures and growth away from the core group. Their childhood is over. It wasn't a childhood they deserved, perhaps. It was filled with trauma and terror, but it was also filled with strong memories and bonds that shaped them into who they are. It brought them closer to people they wouldn't have been close with otherwise, and allowed them to find parts of themselves they didn't know were there. And now it's time for Holly and her friends to have the same experience, to have better, less traumatic teenage years than the older siblings did, armed with the knowledge and growth that Mike and the gang had to learn the hard way. The story continues, passed on to a new generation who can have their own experiences and friendships and adventures together. The others move on, starting a new campaign, a new chapter, continuing their stories separate and together, now having changed for the better. In a lot of ways, I think the experiences of Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas, and Max kind of speak to the kids who grew up with the show that had some of their essential teen years upended by the pandemic. They became saddled with shit they didn't ask for and affected their lives in irreversible ways. They're mad about it, as Dustin says, furious, but they also have no choice but to try to do their parts to make things better, to live, rely on each other, strengthen their bonds, set an example for the younger kids. I mean, it's just so beautiful. Then there's Joyce and Hopper finally getting together, breaking away from the Hawkins and starting a new life in Montauk, deciding to live and be happy, refusing to let their pain detract from their happiness. And really, that's the core of what this show has always been about. It's the fact that we aren't defined by our trauma, that there is strength in who we are, and we all deserve to live and be happy. Which is why it's extremely frustrating that they kind of denied this for the one character who deserved happiness more than anyone. There's a great moment where Hopper tries to prevent Elle from being a martyr like him, from putting her life at risk because there will never be an end to the suffering. He tells her that she has to fight for a life beyond this. A life she didn't think she deserves, has been conditioned to think is impossible for her, but one her dad is going to help her get because his whole mission is to make her life better than his. Not only is this in conversation with the older generations helping the next ones have a better life, but it's a beautiful moment where Hopper finally understands that he can't let his fear, his trauma rule his life. He finally understands that he has to set a proper example for Elle by acting in a way that speaks to what he's been trying to tell her, that allows Elle to believe she deserves better. He learns, for the millionth time at this point it seems, but like for real this time, to stop being overprotective and controlling and allow his adopted daughter to experience the fullness of life that was denied from her for so long. By the end of the scene, there's almost a recognition on Elle's part that Hopper's right. Even Callie has a moment where she gets it, reconsidering what she's asking Elle to do and sacrificing her life to put an end to Papa's experimentation. While it was a constant back and forth of Elle getting her freedom, a sense of normalcy, then feeling like she doesn't belong, then having to address her past trauma and Henry, there's no denying that given the general themes of the show, the whole series was building up to Elle recognizing that she can be different, can endure all the things that she's endured, let the past die, and find happiness with her friends and family. There was a final breakthrough in that conversation with Hopper, and then one more when Elle helps him realize that she's not a kid anymore. She's not a replacement for his biological daughter. She's her own person. That doesn't take away from the relationship they have, but he has to stop treating her like a stand-in for the daughter he lost. His daughter didn't have a choice in her life and death, but 11 does, and he can't make her choices for her. He needs to trust her to make the right choice, whatever that may be. It gives 11 agency. While it feels like a bit of backpedaling and recycling of the previous conversation, I do like that it comes to the conclusion that Hopper has to trust Elle to make the right choice, equipped with everything he and her friends have taught her and that she's learned along the way, which is why it's so fucked up that it eventually amounts to her killing herself for no fucking reason, as if the previous 5 seasons and countless breakthroughs amounted to nothing. And it would be frustrating enough, but then it becomes even more frustrating in the final minutes when the show tries to have it both ways, trying to chicken out of the one bold decision, if you can even really call it that, they made. The show wants the emotional weight of 11 dying, Mike's grief, the group's loss, Hopper having to let go, but then it sneakily winks at an who knows ending about her fate. The friends get to be at peace thinking 11 broke free free and is having the life she deserved, which, you know, is nice for them, but it muddies the whole thing. It almost would have been better if Hopper knew she had to go away to get away from the threat of the military, that he could be at peace knowing she wasn't going to sacrifice herself, wasn't going to be a martyr like they discussed, but had to disappear for good, which would allow him to understand the need to let go. It would also give his conversation with Mike about accepting and not hating yourself even more weight because he knows. That scene with Mike is genuinely great too, albeit, you know, a repeat of the moment he had with Jane, but it's nice to see him recognize the loss, blame, grief, and self-hatred in Mike that he addressed in himself. It's advice that shows Hopper's growth and how he's helping the kids with theirs. That moment could have been an emotional recognition of what has to be done while giving Eleven a future she deserves instead of this mealy-mouthed, non-committal ending. Obviously, I'd have preferred her to be rewarded with happiness among friends and family, but even if I disagree with the Duffers' decision to quote-unquote kill Eleven, at least they made a decision, only to undercut the whole thing because I guess they also realized it was a bad decision. It's just, it's unreal, dude. Unreal.
How do we know it's true? We don't. But I choose to believe that it is.
The finale provides closure, and look, I'm grateful for that. It's satisfying-ish, save for the 11-sized problem, but expected. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but overall, it's a finale underserved by the season attached to it. The Duffers could have made some minor adjustments and inclusions with Will and 11, and had it be the finale of season 4, to be honest with you. Maybe make it a 3-part conclusion. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. The epilogue reminds me why I loved this show in the first place, but it was a bit much to get there, and I can't say that anything this season allowed those beats to feel earned. It definitely felt like a case where the ending was in place, but getting there was the problem. The characters grew up, but I can't say the show ever did in the end. Season 5 is the result of a phenomenon collapsing under its own weight, feeling it needs to live up to the expectations and hype, and so delivering scale without the things that give scale heft. Every episode is trying to be the finale of season 4, and it becomes numbing after a while, losing itself in the process of trying to be everything to everyone. It became a show that was afraid of killing its darlings, taking bold swings and scaling up while forgetting why people gave a shit in the first place. It does enough rights that Stranger Things won't go down as a complete disaster. It won't be Game of Thrones season 8, where the ending negated everything that came before and no one cares to ever revisit that show ever again, but it was disappointing. The show gave us something, and when compared to a lot of long-running shows that struggle with finales, I guess that's better than nothing, even if it could have given us so much more and deserved so much more.